Hey guys, it's Jane. I'm here today to do a book review, and the book that I am going to be reviewing is this one. Depends what you mean by Extremist by John Safran. Now, I read this on my e-reader, as I do most of my reading, but I went out this morning and bought a paper copy because I wanted to have one that I can lend to people. This is, I think, really quite an important book. It raises lots of really interesting questions, and I want to see how many people I can, blackmail into giving it a try. It's a non-fiction work, and the events that it retells take place from mid-2015 to the end of 2016. It was published in May, so it's not kind of like newspaper up to the minute, but by the same token, it is very, very contemporary. So this is how it starts. A photo rolls into my Facebook feed. A skinhead with a swastika inked on his noggin and a cool-as black dude are staring each other down. The photo was snapped at the first rally of Reclaim Australia, a group fighting back against Islam and multiculturalism. The black dude is part of No Room for Racism. These guys sprung up in response to Reclaim Australia, and No Room for Racism has turned this photo into an advertisement to encourage its supporters to rock up to the next Reclaim Australia versus No Room for Racism showdown. It's mid-2015 and this is all happening in Melbourne. Thrilled that there's something as exciting as skinheads roaming around my hometown. I've been into races since high school. I scribbled down the date of the upcoming rally. Okay, so that's the sort of inciting incident for this story. Now, John Safran is a moderately well-known media personality in Australia and especially in Melbourne. He's Jewish, which is quite important to his investigations in this story, because he's talking to people who others call racists, and he's talking to leftists, and he's talking to Muslims of various different stripes. And the whole fact of his Jewishness continues to come back and come back in a number of really unexpected ways. The whole sort of thrust of this story is that things are almost always more complicated once you get down into the weeds than they appear from what you read in the headlines in the newspaper. When he got to this Reclaim Australia versus No Room for Racism rally, he found that almost all of the No Room for Racism folk were middle-class white dudes, and quite a significant proportion of the Reclaim Australia folk were people of colour. And that's just sort of the first instance of things being more complicated than they seem. John Safran is, something approaching a comedian, something approaching a journalist, and he's just a guy who never seems to have grown out of that thing that kids have where they ask the awkward question. Most of us as adults, we learn that there are certain things in certain places that you just don't say, and John Safran just doesn't seem to ever have learnt this. He's kind of stupidly brave in a lot of the things that he does in this book, and in other exploits that he's carried off. At moments in the story where he's telling you stuff that he's done, like places that he's visited and people that he's looked up to talk to, there is this kind of background sense of looming violence which never quite breaks to the surface. One of the threads in this that I really resonated with is the fact that he takes a lot of the religious elements of these political conflicts seriously in a way that most media are just ill-equipped to do. Here's an example of a section where he's talking about some of the religious underpinnings of these conflicts. The mindset of the devout, magical thinking, seeing patterns in the world, a sense that there are no coincidences, a determination that friends and strangers must be saved, karma and providence. I read a poll that ranked countries by how important their people consider religion to be. Australia lay near the bottom of the list. At the top of the list were countries like the Philippines, India, and Muslim lands, countries from where our new immigrants are coming. I don't know if terrorists are crossing our borders, but magical thinkers, pixies, certainly are. And this is why Australia will change. I know this because I'm a pixie myself. I just crossed over to your side momentarily to warn you. So John is talking to a whole bunch of people who are involved in this Patriot Movement, this Reclaim Australia movement. It has slightly different versions and guises throughout the course of the book. The presenting issue in Australia in these circles at the time when the book was written was first and foremost Islam and Muslim immigration. Now, as he points out, these same groups of people who have been making noise in political circles in Australia for decades have only recently latched on to the Muslim thing. It was about Asian immigration not that long ago. And there are signs towards the end of the book that some, at least, of the leaders who are behind this movement are quite keen to move beyond Islam onto the next thing. This, of course, is not to say that huge damage may not be done in the meantime, nor is it to say that some, at least, of the concerns are entirely groundless. It's all more complicated than that. One element that is given very little serious thought in most media analysis of these questions are the class issues involved. In Melbourne, for example, which is where a large part of this book takes place, life is very different inside the tram tracks than it is outside the tram tracks. And it seems to be very easy for comfortable inner city people whose kids all go to private schools anyway to dismiss the concerns of people whose experience of life is very, very different. There aren't a huge number of answers that come out of this book. In a literary sense, it has quite an unsatisfactory conclusion, although the truth of the matter is that these things just keep rolling on, and so an overly neat end point would probably have been against the grain of the work. But it really is a book worth reading for people in Australia in particular, for all that it does raise some really troubling questions. It is a very easy read with a number of uncomfortably humorous moments along the way. So, depends what you mean by Extremist by John Safran. The subtitle is Going Rogue with Australian Deplorables. I really think this is a book that should be widely read and discussed. Okay, that's it for me today. Hope you're all well, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.